It was a crisp autumn morning in Chicago's Loop, where the city's heartbeat pulsed through glass skyscrapers and bustling sidewalks. Golden leaves drifted lazily from the trees lining Michigan Avenue, catching the sunlight in a dance of amber and rust. Taxis honked, their yellow bodies weaving through traffic, while pedestrians in tailored coats and sneakers moved with the rhythm of a city that never slowed. At the corner of Wabash and Madison, the Lakeview Women's Health Center stood like a polished jewel, its glass facade reflecting the urban energy. Inside, the clinic promised cutting-edge care, its marble floors gleaming under soft LED lights, modern art adorning the walls, and an air of exclusivity that whispered wealth and privilege. Maya Thompson paused outside the entrance, her breath visible in the cool air. At 30, she carried herself with quiet grace, her hand resting protectively on her 7-month pregnant belly. Her deep brown skin glowed in the morning light, framed by a simple navy sweater and black maternity jeans that hugged her figure comfortably. Her hair, twisted into neat braids, fell past her shoulders, and a worn canvas tote bag hung from her arm. As a social worker who spent her days advocating for foster children, Maya was no stranger to navigating spaces where she felt out of place. Yet, standing before the clinic's towering glass doors, she felt a familiar twinge of unease. The kind that came from knowing she was being watched, judged, before she'd even spoken a word. She glanced at her phone. 9:45 a.m. Her appointment with Dr. Elizabeth Warren was at 10:00, a routine ultrasound to check on the baby she and her husband Marcus had dreamed of for years. Marcus had promised to meet her here, but a last-minute call from the U.S. Attorney's Office had pulled him into an urgent case. "I'll be there by 10:15, Maya," he'd said over the phone, his deep voice steady but apologetic. "You know I wouldn't miss this." She believed him. Marcus always kept his word, but the sting of walking into this appointment alone lingered. This was their first detailed ultrasound, a chance to see their baby's face in 3D, a milestone they'd planned to share. Now she'd have to face the sterile opulence of Lakeview Women's Health Center on her own. Taking a deep breath, Maya adjusted her tote bag and whispered to her belly, "All right, little one, let's do this." Her voice was soft, a shield against the anxiety creeping up her spine. She pushed through the automatic doors, the hiss of their mechanism swallowing her into the clinic's polished silence. The lobby was a study in wealth, leather chairs arranged in precise rows, a crystal chandelier casting prisms across the marble floor, and a floral arrangement so perfect it looked sculpted rather than grown. The air smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic, a combination that felt both calming and clinical. Behind a sleek reception desk, a young woman in her mid-20s, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, typed rapidly on a computer. Her name tag read, Claire. She glanced up as Maya approached, her blue eyes flickering over Maya's sweater and jeans before returning to the screen with practiced indifference. "Good morning," Maya said, her tone polite but firm, honed from years of navigating spaces where she had to prove her right to be. "I'm Maya Thompson, here for a 10-watt appointment with Dr. Warren." Claire's fingers paused over the keyboard, her lips parting slightly as she looked Maya up and down again. The glance wasn't overtly hostile, but it carried the weight of judgment, a silent question about whether Maya belonged in a place like this. "Thompson?" she repeated, as if the name needed confirmation. She tapped a few keys, her eyes narrowing at the screen. "You're here for Dr. Warren?" "Yes," Maya said, forcing a smile. "I confirmed the appointment yesterday evening." A pause hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. Claire's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I see," she said, sliding a clipboard across the counter with a practiced flick of her wrist. "Please fill this out and have a seat." Maya took the clipboard, her fingers brushing the cool metal edge. She felt the eyes of the room on her, two women in designer coats whispering across the lobby, an older man adjusting his glasses and avoiding her gaze entirely. She settled into a leather chair, the clipboard balanced on her lap, and began filling out the intake forms with careful precision. Her pen moved steadily, but her hands trembled slightly, betraying the effort it took to ignore the weight of the room's unspoken assumptions. She was used to this. The subtle stares, the tightened grips on purses, the way her presence seemed to disrupt the polished calm of places like this. But today, with her baby's heartbeat on the line, it stung deeper. She glanced at her phone. Again, 9:52. Marcus was still 20 minutes away, assuming traffic didn't slow him down. She tried to focus on the forms, name, date of birth, medical history, but the whispers from across the room crept into her ears. "Does she even have insurance?" one woman murmured, her voice low but not low enough. Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept writing, her pen digging a little harder into the paper. At 10:03, a nurse in pale blue scrubs appeared in the doorway, holding a tablet. "Maya Thompson?" she called, her tone flat, her eyes scanning the room like she was checking off a list. Maya stood, smoothing her sweater and clutching her tote bag. She offered a small smile, but the nurse had already turned, leading her down a hallway lined with framed posters of smiling, mostly white mothers cradling newborns. The soft hum of classical music played overhead, meant to soothe but feeling hollow to Maya, like a mask over something colder. They stopped at a door labeled Exam Room 4C. The nurse pushed it open and gestured inside. "Dr. Warren will be with you shortly," she said, her voice clipped before closing the door with a soft click. Maya stood alone in the room, the antiseptic smell sharp in her nose. The examination bed was neatly made, a monitor in the corner blinking silently. She sat carefully on the edge, her hands resting on her belly, feeling the faint flutter of her baby's movements. "Just a few minutes," she murmured, checking her phone again. 10:07. Marcus was cutting it close. The door opened at 10:12 with a soft creak, and Dr. Elizabeth Warren stepped in. She was in her late 40s with sharp cheekbones, blonde hair, swept into a severe bun, and gray eyes that seemed to cut through the air. Her white coat was pristine, her posture rigid, and her expression carried none of the warmth Maya had hoped for. She didn't offer a handshake or a smile, just stood there, clipboard in hand, staring at Maya with a look that felt less like a doctor's assessment and more like a judgment. "You're Maya Thompson?" Dr. Warren asked, her voice cool and edged with condescension, as if Maya's presence was an inconvenience. "Yes. Good morning," Maya replied, sitting up straighter. "I'm here for the 3D ultrasound." Dr. Warren's eyes flicked over Maya's sweater, her jeans, her tote bag, lingering just long enough to make her discomfort clear. "You came alone," she said, not a question but an accusation, her lips pursing slightly. Maya hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "My husband had an emergency at work. He's on his way." "Of course," Dr. Warren said, her tone dripping with skepticism. She turned to the counter, adjusting a stack of papers with deliberate precision, her movements sharp and theatrical. Then, without looking at Maya, she spoke again, her voice cutting like a scalpel. "Let's be honest, Ms. Thompson. Places like this aren't for people like you. This is a specialized facility, not a walk-in clinic for whoever shows up, alone, looking like they just stepped off a bus." Maya's breath caught, her heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Dr. Warren turned, her eyes narrowing. "I'm saying we have standards here. This isn't a charity case. We cater to mothers who prioritize their health, their children's future, not women who wander in unaccompanied expecting handouts." Maya stood slowly, her fists clenched at her sides. "I scheduled this appointment. I confirmed it. I'm here for my baby, and I deserve to be treated with respect." Dr. Warren stepped closer, her voice lowering to a hiss. "Respect? You people always talk about respect when you want something. You bring chaos, accusations, and then expect us to clean up the mess. Not here. Not today." Maya's heart thundered, her vision blurring with a mix of rage and disbelief. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I won't. Stay here and be insulted." "Oh, you're not going anywhere yet," Dr. Warren said, her lips curling into a sneer. She glanced at the counter, her hand brushing an empty tray. "My pen, Gold Mont Blanc. It was right here this morning." Her eyes locked onto Maya's, cold and deliberate. "And now it's gone." Maya froze, her breath hitching. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Warren's smile was thin and cruel. "We'll see about that. Security will handle this." She turned and left the room, the door clicking shut behind her like a gavel. Maya stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing. Her hand, instinctively, went to her belly, feeling the baby shift as if sensing her distress. She reached for her phone, fumbling to call Marcus, but before she could dial, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. The door swung open, revealing 2 security guards, both white, both male, their faces blank with institutional detachment. The older one, graying at the temples, held a clipboard. The younger one, broad-shouldered and chewing gum, leaned against the doorframe. "Ms. Thompson," the older guard said, his voice flat, "we've had a report of stolen property. You'll need to come with us." "I didn't take anything," Maya said, her voice trembling but resolute. "This is a mistake." "We'll sort it out downstairs," the younger guard said, stepping forward. "Let's go." "I'm pregnant," Maya said, her hand still on her belly. "I don't feel safe being escorted like this. I need to call my husband." "You'll have your chance," the older guard muttered, his tone dismissive. "After we're done." Maya's heart pounded as they flanked her, their presence crowding the small room. She had no choice but to follow, her steps slow and deliberate, as they led her through a back corridor, away from the polished patient areas. The hallway was stark, lined with locked cabinets and smelling of bleach. They reached a gray, unmarked door, and the younger guard pushed it open, revealing a dim security office. A metal desk sat in the center, flanked by filing cabinets and a wall of grainy monitors flickering with camera feeds. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead. "Sit," the younger guard ordered, pointing to a hard plastic chair bolted to the floor. Maya hesitated, her eyes darting to the monitors, then to the guards. She sat slowly, adjusting her jeans, her hands trembling as they rested on her belly. "Please," she said quietly, "I need to call my husband." "Hand over the phone," the younger guard said, extending his hand. Maya's breath hitched. "You can't just—" "You're not under arrest," the older guard said, his tone practiced but cold. "But you're being detained for investigation. Cooperate, and this will go faster." Reluctantly, Maya pulled her phone from her bag and placed it on the desk. The younger guard snatched it, switched it off, and slid it into a drawer with a thud. "We're holding this until we're done," he said. Maya's voice cracked. "This is wrong. I came here for my baby. I didn't take anything." The older guard scribbled something on his clipboard, ignoring her. The younger one leaned against the wall, chewing his gum louder, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Save the story, lady," he said. "We've heard it all before." Maya's lips trembled, but she clenched her jaw, swallowing the scream, building inside her. Her body ached, her stomach tightened, and the baby shifted again, a reminder of why she was here. She inhaled slowly, counting her breaths to keep panic at bay. The room felt smaller with each minute, the walls closing in, the flickering light above buzzing like a warning. Meanwhile, at the front desk, Marcus Thompson stepped through the glass doors of Lakeview Women's Health Center, his polished black shoes clicking against the marble floor. At 35, he carried the quiet intensity of a man who'd spent a decade in federal service, his tailored charcoal suit fitting his tall frame perfectly. A gold lapel pin bearing the seal of the Department of Justice gleamed above his breast pocket. His dark mahogany skin stood out against the sterile brightness of the lobby, drawing cautious glances from the few patients waiting. But Marcus didn't notice. His focus was singular, his eyes locked on the reception desk. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep and even, laced with an authority that didn't need volume. "I'm looking for Maya Thompson. She had a 10 appointment with Dr. Warren. I'm her husband." Claire, the receptionist, looked up, her smile faltering, as she met his gaze. One moment, sir," she said, her fingers hesitating over the keyboard. She tapped nervously, squinting at the screen. "It says she's not in the exam room right now." "Where is she?" Marcus asked, his tone calm but unyielding. Claire's eyes darted away. "There was a Situation. I think she's in the security office downstairs. A misunderstanding, probably. What situation? Marcus's voice sharpened, still professional but commanding. I'm not sure, Claire stammered. Dr. Warren reported something. I can get the floor. Manager, no need, Marcus said, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a slim leather wallet. He opened it with precision, revealing a federal identification badge. Marcus Thompson, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Northern District of Illinois. The seal gleamed under the chandelier's light. Claire's breath hitched. Where's the security office? Marcus asked, his eyes never leaving hers. Down the corridor, past the staff elevator's first door on the left, she said quickly, her face paling. Without another word, Marcus turned, his strides sharp and purposeful, his fingers curled tightly at his sides, the only sign of the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. Someone had made a mistake, and they were about to learn just how costly it was. The fluorescent light in the security office buzzed like a trapped insect, casting a harsh glow over the small, windowless room. Maya Thompson sat rigid in the bolted plastic chair, her hands resting protectively on her 7-month pregnant belly. The air was thick with the scent of bleach and old coffee, and the grainy monitors on the wall flickered with disjointed images of the clinic's hallways. Her heart pounded, a steady drumbeat of fear and fury, but she kept her breathing slow, deliberate, counting each inhale to anchor herself against the rising panic. The 2 security guards stood nearby, their presence looming like a wall she couldn't push through. The older one, with graying temples and a clipboard, scribbled notes with mechanical detachment. The younger one, broad-shouldered and chewing gum with a slow, mocking rhythm, leaned against the wall, his eyes glinting with casual disdain. I didn't take anything, Maya said again, her voice low but firm, cutting through the oppressive silence. I came here for my baby. You have no right to keep me here. The younger guard smirked, popping his gum. Lady, we're just doing our job. You can tell your story when we're done. Done with what? Maya asked, her eyes flashing. You haven't asked me a single question. You haven't searched my bag. You're just holding me. For what? The older guard didn't look up from his clipboard. We're verifying the report, he said, his tone flat, rehearsed. Dr. Warren says her pen's missing. She says you were the last one in the room. That's enough for us to check. Check what? Maya's voice rose slightly, her composure fraying. I didn't go near her desk. I sat on the exam table. The whole time. You can't just lock me in a room because she says something's gone. The younger guard crossed his arms, his smirk widening. You're not locked in. You're detained. Big difference. Now sit tight and stop making this harder than it needs to be. Maya's lips trembled, but she clenched her jaw, swallowing the scream that burned in her throat. Her hands tightened over her belly, feeling the faint flutter of her baby's movements, a reminder of why she was here, why she had to stay strong. She glanced at the monitors, hoping to see something, anything that could prove her innocence, but the screens showed only empty hallways and the clinic's pristine lobby. Her phone, confiscated and locked in the desk drawer, felt like a lifeline just out of reach. She imagined Marcus walking through the front doors right now, his calm, unyielding presence cutting through the clinic's sterile facade. He'd know what to do. He always did. The minutes crawled by, each one heavier than the last. The fluorescent light flickered, the buzz growing louder, as if mocking her isolation. Maya stared at the blank wall, her mind racing. She thought of the forms she'd filled out in the lobby, the whispers from the other patients, the way Dr. Warren's eyes had raked over her like she was an intruder. She thought of her work as a social worker, the countless times she'd fought for kids who'd been dismissed, overlooked, assumed to be less. Now here she was, reduced to the same assumptions, her dignity stripped away in a room that smelled of bureaucracy and indifference. Then, footsteps, heavy, measured, deliberate, echoing down the corridor outside. Maya's head snapped up, her breath catching. The guards exchanged a glance, the younger one straightening, his gum chewing slowing. The door swung open with a metallic creak, and Marcus Thompson stepped inside. He filled the room without effort, his tailored charcoal suit sharp against the drab surroundings. His dark mahogany skin stood out under the harsh light, and the gold lapel pin of the Department of Justice gleamed on his breast pocket. At 35, Marcus carried the quiet intensity of a man who'd spent years navigating courtrooms and crises, his tall frame radiating a controlled power that made the air shift. His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto Maya first, softening for a fraction of a second with relief and love before turning to the guards with a steel that made them flinch. "Maya," he said, his voice deep and steady, crossing the room, in 2 strides to place a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm here. You're okay." "Marcus," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of being seen, of knowing she wasn't alone anymore. He turned to the guards, his expression unreadable but commanding. "You can help me by explaining in detail why you've detained my wife without due cause, without counsel, and without access to her personal property." The younger guard froze, his gum stuck mid-chew. The older one lowered his clipboard, his eyes narrowing. "Sir, we're following protocol," he said, his voice cautious but firm. "There was a report of stolen property. Dr. Warren identified her as a person of interest." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. A person of interest based on what? Evidence? Witness statements? Or just the word of a doctor who decided my wife didn't belong here? The younger guard shifted uncomfortably, his bravado faltering. "We're just doing what we're told, man. She was in the room when the pen went missing." "Show me the footage," Marcus said, his voice low but sharp, like a blade sliding from its sheath. "Right now." The older guard hesitated, glancing at the monitors. "We're not authorized to—" "You are now," Marcus interrupted, pulling out his leather wallet and flipping it open to reveal his federal badge. Assistant U.S. Attorney, Northern District of Illinois. The seal glinted under the fluorescent light, and the guards' faces paled. He held the badge steady for 3 seconds, letting its weight sink in, then snapped the wallet shut. "I'm invoking immediate oversight under federal civil protection. If you delay, this becomes obstruction. Move." The room went silent, the only sound the faint buzz of the light above. The older guard nodded stiffly, turning to the console on the wall. His fingers trembled slightly as he queued up the security footage, the monitors flickering to life. Maya watched, her heart pounding, as the screen showed the hallway outside exam room 4C. The timestamp read 10:03 a.m. She saw herself enter the room, calm and composed, touching only the doorknob and the exam table. At 10:12, Dr. Warren entered, her posture rigid, her movements sharp. At 10:15 she exited, glancing at the counter where a gold Mont Blanc pen gleamed beside a tissue box. The footage showed her touching her pocket, then marching out with a scowl. "There," Marcus said, pointing at the screen. "Freeze it. Zoom in on the counter." The older guard complied, the image sharpening to show the pen clearly visible. Maya's breath caught. "I never went near it," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and outrage. "Roll forward," Marcus instructed, his tone unyielding. The footage skipped ahead. At 10:17, a cleaning attendant entered briefly, mopping the floor but not touching the counter. At 10:20, the pen was still there. Then at 10:22, the camera feed cut out, the screen going black. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Where's the rest?" The older guard swallowed, sweat beading on his forehead. That's when the cleaning crew shifts. There's a blind spot in the handoff." "Convenient," Marcus said, his voice a quiet blade. He turned to the desk, opened the drawer, and retrieved Maya's phone, handing it to her gently. "Detaining my wife without due process is a civil rights violation. Denying her medical autonomy while pregnant borders on reckless endangerment. I'm filing formal complaints with the DOJ, and a public incident report will be submitted to the state medical board before the day ends. I suggest you prepare statements." The younger guard took a step back, his gum forgotten. The older one opened his mouth, then closed it, his clipboard hanging limply at his side. Maya clutched her phone, her hands shaking, but her resolve hardening. She stood slowly, her chin lifting, her eyes meeting Marcus's. "I want to see Dr. Warren," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "I want to look her in the eye." Marcus nodded once, his hand still on her shoulder. "Let's go." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, the hum of the machinery the only sound as Maya and Marcus stood side by side. She felt the weight of the morning pressing on her chest, but Marcus's presence was a shield, his calm intensity grounding her. The doors opened to a sleek hallway, its glass walls reflecting the Chicago skyline. A uniformed administrator waited. Outside a conference room, his face tense, his hands clasped nervously. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he stammered, wiping his brow. "Dr. Warren is inside. We've convened the Internal Ethics Board for an immediate review." Marcus's expression didn't soften. "Good. Let's get started." The conference room was starkly modern, a long glass table stretching beneath bright overhead lights. 3 board members sat at one end, 2 men and 1 woman, all white, their faces a mix of discomfort and apprehension. Dr. Elizabeth Warren sat at the far side, her arms crossed, her lips pursed into a thin line. Her blonde hair was still pulled into a severe bun, but her gray eyes betrayed a flicker of unease, a crack in her earlier confidence. Maya took a seat opposite her, her hands folded over her belly, her posture straight, despite the ache in her back. Marcus remained standing, his badge visible in his breast pocket, a silent reminder of his authority. The board chair, a balding man in his 60s, cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, we've reviewed the preliminary footage. We understand you wish to file formal action." Marcus placed a thin stack of papers on the table, typed and time-stamped. "My wife was falsely accused of theft, illegally detained, denied access to communication, and humiliated in your facility. While under your care, we have footage proving the alleged theft never occurred. We also have audio recordings of racially charged comments made by your attending physician." Dr. Warren scoffed, her voice sharp. "This is absurd. I followed protocol. I had every reason to suspect. You had every reason to assume." Marcus cut in, his tone cold and precise, based solely on her appearance, not her actions, not the facts, just the color of her skin and the fact that she was alone. Maya leaned forward, her voice clear and deliberate, cutting through the tension like a blade. "You looked at me and saw something disposable. You didn't see a social worker, a wife, a mother-to-be. You didn't even see a person. You saw a problem you could dismiss." Dr. Warren's eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening. "That's not how it happened. You came in alone, dressed like you didn't belong here. I made a professional judgment." Maya's voice didn't rise, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. "You told me I looked like I came from a bus station. You said, this wasn't a place for people like me. You called me a thief before you ever spoke to me like a human being. That wasn't professional. That was personal." The board members exchanged uneasy glances, one shifting in his seat, another scribbling notes. The chair cleared his throat again, his voice cracking slightly. We'll begin proceedings immediately. Dr. Warren, you'll be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." Dr. Warren stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is outrageous," she hissed, her face flushed. "You're taking their word over mine?" Without waiting for a response, she stormed out, the glass door slamming behind her. Maya exhaled, her shoulders sagging slightly, but her eyes remained fixed on the spot where Dr. Warren had sat. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steadying her. "This isn't over," he said quietly, his voice a promise. "Not until they understand." The glass door of the conference room still vibrated faintly from Dr. Elizabeth Warren's abrupt exit, the sharp echo of her departure, lingering in the sterile air of Lakeview Women's Health Center. Maya Thompson sat at the long glass table, her hands folded over her 7-month pregnant belly, her posture steady despite the ache in her back and the weight of the morning's ordeal. Her deep brown eyes, once clouded with fear and fury, now burned with a quiet resolve. Beside her, Marcus Thompson stood like a sentinel, his tailored charcoal suit and Department of Justice lapel pin a silent declaration of authority. The 3 board members across the table, 2 men and 1 woman, all white, shifted uncomfortably, their faces a mix of apprehension and forced neutrality. The board chair, a balding man in his 60s named Dr. Harold Grayson, cleared his throat, his voice faltering under the weight of the moment. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Grayson began, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "We take this matter extremely seriously. Dr. Warren's actions were unacceptable, and we've initiated her immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. We'll cooperate fully with any formal complaints filed with the Department of Justice or the State Medical Board." Marcus's expression remained unyielding, his dark eyes fixed on the chair. "Cooperation is a start," he said, his voice low and precise, each word carrying the weight of a gavel. "But let's be clear. My wife was falsely accused of theft, illegally detained, denied communication, and subjected to racially charged insults in a facility that claims to prioritize patient care. This isn't just about Dr. Warren. It's about a culture that allowed her to act with impunity. We're demanding transparency, a public apology, mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, and institutional reforms to ensure this never happens again." Dr. Grayson nodded quickly, his fingers fidgeting with a pen. "We'll begin implementing those measures immediately. The Ethics Board will review all patient interaction protocols, and will consult with external experts to develop the training program." The woman on the board, Dr. Margaret Klein, leaned forward, her glasses slipping slightly down her nose. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her tone softer but cautious, "we deeply regret the distress you've experienced. If there's anything specific you'd like us to address, we're listening." Maya's gaze shifted to Dr. Klein, her voice steady but laced with steel. "What I want is for no other woman to walk into this clinic and feel like I did today. I want you to understand what it's like to be judged before you open your mouth, to be treated like a criminal because of the color of your skin. I came here for my baby, to make sure they're healthy, to see their face for the first time. Instead, I was humiliated, isolated, and accused of something I didn't do. That's not just a mistake. That's a failure of your entire system." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling like a stone. The third board member, a younger man named Dr. Stephen Patel, scribbled notes furiously, his face flushed with what might have been shame or discomfort. Dr. Grayson cleared his throat again. "We'll ensure a thorough review," he said, "and we'll issue a public statement acknowledging the incident." "Not just a statement," Marcus said, sliding his stack of papers forward. "A commitment, written, public, and actionable. My office will follow up to ensure compliance, and we'll be pursuing federal civil rights litigation to hold this facility accountable." Dr. Klein nodded, her expression tight. "Understood. We'll draft the statement today and begin the process for the reforms you've outlined." Maya stood slowly, her hand resting on her belly, feeling the faint kick of her baby, a reminder of why she was fighting. "I'd like to leave now," she said, her voice calm but final. "But this isn't over. Not for me, and not for the women who come after me." Marcus placed a hand on her lower back, guiding her toward the door. The board members rose awkwardly, murmuring assurances, but Maya didn't look back. As they stepped into the hallway, the glass walls reflecting the Chicago skyline, she felt a shift inside her. The fear that had gripped her in the security office was still there, but it was tempered now by something stronger: purpose. Marcus's presence beside her was a steady anchor, his silence speaking louder than any words. They didn't need to say it aloud. They both knew this was only the beginning. The elevator ride to the lobby was quiet, the hum of the machinery a faint backdrop to Maya's racing thoughts. She clutched her phone, now back in her hands, and glanced at the screen. 11:32 a.m. Less than 2 hours had passed since she'd walked into the clinic, but it felt like a lifetime. The doors opened to the lobby, where the receptionist, Claire, avoided their gaze, her fingers tapping nervously on her keyboard. The other patients in the waiting area glanced up, their whispers falling silent as Maya and Marcus crossed the marble floor. For the first time that morning, Maya didn't feel the weight of their stares. She felt the strength of her husband beside her, the life growing inside her, and the clarity of what she had to do next. Outside, The autumn air was crisp, the golden leaves swirling around their feet as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Marcus turned to her, his eyes softening. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but searching. Maya nodded, though her hands still trembled slightly. "I will be," she said. "But I can't let this go, Marcus. Not just for me, but for every woman who's been through something like this. We have to make them listen." He took her hand, his grip firm and warm. "We will. I promise. Over." The next week, the incident at Lakeview Women's Health Center rippled outward, like a stone dropped into still water. Marcus wasted no time. By the end of the day, he had filed a formal complaint with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, detailing the clinic's violations: unlawful detainment, denial of communication, and discrimination based on race and socioeconomic status. He also submitted a report to the Illinois Department of Public Health, requesting a review of the clinic's licensing and patient care protocols. His office, already familiar with cases of institutional bias, began preparing for federal litigation, gathering statements from Maya and requesting additional security footage from the clinic. Maya, meanwhile, refused to stay silent. She reached out to local civil rights advocates, including the Chicago chapter of the NAACP and a grassroots organization focused on healthcare equity. Her story, raw and unflinching, resonated with women across the city who had faced similar treatment in medical settings. A community organizer named Aisha Brooks, a fierce advocate for Black maternal health, contacted Maya the next day. "We need your voice," Aisha said over the phone, her tone urgent but warm. "This isn't just about one clinic. It's about a system that fails Black women every day. Will you speak?" Maya hesitated, her hand resting on her belly as she sat on the couch in their Hyde Park apartment. The memory of the security office, the buzzing light, the guard's sneers, Dr. Warren's cruel words, still haunted her. But so did the fire in her chest, the need to turn her pain into something bigger. "Yes," she said finally. "I'll speak." 2 weeks later, on a chilly October morning, Maya stood at a podium outside Lakeview Women's Health Center, flanked by Marcus, Aisha, and a dozen other advocates. A small crowd had gathered, reporters with microphones, community members holding signs that read, "Healthcare Justice Now" and "Black Mothers Matter," and a few curious passers-by drawn by the commotion. The clinic's glass facade loomed behind her, its polished surface reflecting the gray sky. Maya's navy coat hugged her pregnant frame, and her braids were pulled back, framing her face with quiet dignity. She adjusted the microphone, her hand steady now, and looked out at the faces before her. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and strong, carrying over the hum of the city. "My name is Maya Thompson. 2 weeks ago, I came to this clinic for a routine ultrasound to see my baby's face for the first time. I came here as a mother, a wife, a social worker who fights every day for the kids in this city. But instead of care, I was met with suspicion, insults, and accusations. I was accused of theft without evidence, detained without cause, and treated like I didn't belong because of the color of my skin." The crowd murmured, a ripple of agreement and anger. Aisha nodded beside her, holding a sign aloft. Marcus stood tall, his eyes scanning the crowd, pride etched into every line of his face. "This isn't just about me," Maya continued, her voice rising with purpose. "It's about every Black woman who walks into a room and is assumed to be less. It's about the systems that let those assumptions go unchecked, that let a doctor look at me and see a thief instead of a person. It's about the fear we carry, the exhaustion of proving we belong in spaces meant to serve us. I'm here to say we deserve better. We will not be quiet. We will not be afraid. We will not disappear just to make you comfortable." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of sound that echoed off the skyscrapers. Reporters scribbled notes, their cameras flashing. Aisha stepped forward, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. "We're with you," she said, her voice amplifying through the microphone. "And we're demanding change. Not just here, but in every clinic, every hospital, every system that fails us." Marcus leaned in, his voice low but firm. "The Department of Justice is investigating this incident, and we're pushing for federal oversight of healthcare facilities to prevent discrimination. This clinic has committed to reforms, but we'll hold them accountable. This is the start, not the end. The press conference ended with a call to action, Aisha urging the crowd to join a citywide coalition for healthcare equity. As the reporters dispersed and the advocates began packing up, Maya felt a weight lift, not entirely but enough to breathe a little easier. She looked down at her belly, smiling faintly as her baby kicked again. "We're doing this for you," she whispered. In the days that followed, Lakeview Women's Health Center released a formal statement acknowledging the incident and announcing Dr. Warren's indefinite suspension. The clinic committed to mandatory anti-bias training, a review of patient interaction protocols, and the appointment of a diversity officer to oversee reforms. The statement was met with cautious optimism from advocates, who vowed to monitor the clinic's progress. Maya and Marcus didn't stop there. With Aisha's help, they launched a community initiative called Mothers for Equity, aimed at advocating for Black and marginalized women in healthcare. The initiative partnered with local organizations to provide legal support, community education, and policy advocacy. Maya spoke at hospitals and community centers, sharing her story and listening to others, building a network of voices that refused to be silenced. One evening, as they sat in their apartment, the Chicago skyline twinkling outside, Marcus looked at Maya with a quiet pride. "You're changing things," he said, his hand resting on hers. "Not just for us, but for everyone." Maya smiled, her eyes glistening. "We're changing things," she corrected. "Together." The road ahead was long, but as the autumn leaves fell and the city moved forward, Maya felt a spark of hope. Her baby would be born into a world that wasn't perfect, but one where she and Marcus were fighting to make it better. One step, one voice, one lesson at a time. 3 months later, Maya gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Amara, meaning eternal in Igbo. The delivery was at a different hospital, one with a reputation for equitable care, and the experience was night and day from her ordeal at Lakeview. As Maya held Amara in her arms, Marcus beside her, she felt a profound sense of victory, not just over the clinic, but over the systems that had tried to diminish her. Amara's tiny hand curled around her finger, and Maya whispered, "You're going to grow up in a world we're making better, I promise." The work continued. Mothers for Equity grew, securing grants to train healthcare providers and advocate for policy changes at the state level. The DOJ's investigation into Lakeview prompted broader scrutiny of Chicago's healthcare facilities, sparking a citywide conversation about equity. And every time Maya spoke, whether to a room of 10 or a crowd of hundreds, she carried Amara's future in her heart. A reminder that justice wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. Join us to share meaningful stories like Maya's. Hit the like and subscribe buttons and turn on the notification bell to start your day with stories of resilience, justice, and hope.